Hi guys, yesterday I reviewed the very fantastic Sony A6700, which in my opinion is the best value Sony hybrid ever made. But I also own the FX30, which is a great value in its own right, and this shares the same sensor and the same processor as the A6700. And a lot of people were asking me what exactly are the differences between the two cameras. Is it just simply one is for photos and one is for video? Well, it is definitely not that simple. Or is it? No, it isn't. Otherwise, why would I make this video? Anyway, let's talk about it. So the day that I am publishing this video, which is July 13th, 2023, Sony is releasing the A6700 for pre-order at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So I have a link below. Go through that link if you want to go directly to the pre-order page. And if you want that camera soon, you should probably pre-order it because it is going to be a very long line for that camera. Plus I get all that affiliate income and I do love money. So obviously there are tons of similarities between these two cameras, especially when it comes to the video functions. I will put up some side by side. Here is just straight out of the box. If you press the auto settings, here is what the two cameras look like. But if you grade them in say S-Log3, you can make them look pretty much identical. Their rolling shutter is of course identical. Same sensor, same processor. The low light performance is going to be identical. The 4K 24, the 4K 60 with no crop, and the 4K 120 with a 1.5 times crop will be identical on both of these cameras. They both have focus breathing compensation, focus mapping, the ability to apply user LUTs, the list goes on and on. So what I will do now is just tell you what are the differences between the two cameras and who the two cameras might be for. So first, let's talk about the advantages the FX30 has over the A6700. 2 card slots. I think that 2 card slots, especially when you're doing pro work, it's great to have that backup recording. Something happens to one of the SD cards, it gets corrupt, you break it, you lose it. If you have that backup, that is just such a great fail-safe. Even if you're someone who records externally to a Ninja 5 and you wanted to do redundant recording that way with the A6700, that is a good solution, but to have the 2 card slots right there in the camera, most pros really want 2 card slots when they're shooting anything. Thermal management. The FX30 has a fan, so that is as good as it gets when it comes to overheating. So with the A6700, I did not get any overheating up to 4K 60. It just ran until the battery ran out, but that was in normal room temperature environments. If I was out in a very warm environment, then, you know, the camera may overheat and it doesn't have a fan to negate all of that extra heat in whatever environment. I mean, I'm out in the desert and I'm filming something, I'm going to want a fan, and that is proved with the 4K 120. The 4K 120 overheats on the A6700 at about 19 minutes, whereas the 4K 120 never overheats on the FX30. I've run it for hours and hours, no overheating in 4K 120, so much better thermal management on the FX30. A6700 is great in regular shooting conditions, but the FX30 is going to be a reliable workhorse. You can do raw output over HDMI. For people who really want to step up their filmmaking game and they want to shoot in RAW to do all of the fancy things that RAW can do for you, then you can do that with the FX30. There is no raw output over HDMI with the A6700. Speaking of HDMI, full-size HDMI port on the FX30. The A6700 only has the micro HDMI. Those things are finicky, they are prone to breaking, and even just on set, in and out, it's so much better to have the full-size HDMI when you're constantly hooking up things like external monitors to your camera. It has a much higher resolution LCD screen, 2.36 million dots versus 1.03 million dots. Now, in real life, in practical terms, when you're looking at the two screens, you don't necessarily always notice the difference between the two. The A6700, it's a very usable screen. However, when conditions get extremely bright, you're going to want that extra resolution of the LCD that is on the FX30. It has the Cine EI menu, and a lot of pros who are used to the higher end cameras, they enjoy that Cine EI menu that is there on the FX30, not on the A6700. There's also the option for timecode in on the FX30, whereas the A6700, no. The FX30 has the zoom rocker right there, so if you have a power zoom on your camera, you can just use the zoom rocker to go in and out. mounting points. You see all of the mounting points that are all over this body, so you don't necessarily need to put this in a cage. You can just mount things right to the camera body itself. Nice and convenient. You can buy this optional XLR handle for the FX30, and this could be your whole rig right here. The A6700, you can buy an XLR capsule that will work with it. However, you're probably going to want to rig that out and have rails and a cage and all of this, and you can just take this and go, and you can mount things, like I said, with a 1/4 20 threads right there. And in general, if you don't rig out the A6700, the FX30 is going to look a lot more impressive to clients. And that may not seem like a big deal, but it is sometimes. If you're out shooting something and you have something that looks more like a cinema rig, then people tend to trust you a little bit more. So now let's talk about the advantages the A6700 has over the FX30. First one I'll mention is the EVF. 2.36 million dot EVF. So this electronic viewfinder can be very helpful for people when it's a nice bright sunny day in both photos and videos. And it's also a bright EVF at a 1.07 times magnification. It can be very useful. And speaking of photos, you can do 11 frames per second in both mechanical shutter and electronic shutter. And that is just far, far better than the FX30, where you can only do one photo at a time and it's electronic shutter. So if you're going to be doing a lot of photography, the FX30 is probably not a camera you should be looking at. The A6700 has that new AI processing unit, so the autofocus is bananas good. There is nothing to complain about on the FX30 in terms of autofocus, but the A6700 definitely has taken it up a notch. You can do that new feature, which is auto framing, so if you're filming yourself a lot, it's nice where it'll just keep you in the center of the frame and almost like a cameraman is following you, or you can program it to zoom in and out at 15-second or 30-second intervals. And you can do that in the camera while outputting just the regular image to, say, a Ninja 5 and then record that entire screen. And that way you could get a really dynamic video with just yourself standing in a parking lot without your friends, because you don't have any friends. I have friends, you don't know me. There's even more functions on the touchscreen, so even though you have less buttons on the A6700, the touchscreen actually has a few more functions, and you can swipe those away if you don't want to see them. And you can also control things like aperture, shutter speed, and ISO just by dragging your finger on the touchscreen, and I really like that. It has that new cool time-lapse mode where it will just record the time-lapse for you and make the video in camera like the Panasonic cameras like to do, and you can't do that on the FX30. I find that very convenient for time lapses. It's got a better clear image zoom. The clear image zoom on the A6700, it does not lose tracking and it does not lose your eye autofocus, so your lenses definitely do get far more reach out of them. You could have, you know, a 16mm lens and you can zoom in basically 1.5 times clear image zoom with not very much, or if any, perceivable quality loss. Certainly to my eyes, I can't see any quality loss, and seeing how you keep your autofocus, like your tracking and your eye autofocus, that makes every lens you buy a better value. It is a smaller and lighter camera, so it's much easier to take around, much better for things like gimbal work, and also for vlogging. You definitely don't want to take the FX30 out vlogging. It is quite a hefty little camera, whereas the A6700 is almost a dream vlogging camera. Streaming. The A6700 can stream 4K 30 straight from the USB-C, and it also powers the camera a little bit, so you don't just have a trickle-down charge. I actually did the A6700. I did a 4-hour stream. I still had 65% battery. It did not overheat, and it was a great experience. You have to use just picture profile off. You can't use any of the S-Log3 or any of the other picture profiles, but I like the way that the image looks. So if you're going to stream and you want it nice and simple, straight from a USB-C, you don't have to buy dummy batteries, anything like that, A6700. If you do the FX30, then you're going to want a capture card like the Streamer X or the Camlink 4K, and then probably, you know, a dummy battery. And finally, the price. The A6700, at least in the US, is $400 cheaper than the FX30, and that is a substantial amount of money. So at the beginning of the video, I said that it's not as simple as one camera is good for photos and one is good for video. The reason I said that is, number one, for intrigue, but number two is that even if you don't use the photo settings of the A6700, and I should also preface this by saying, if you are going to take a lot of photos, then the A6700 is the way to go. The FX30 is not a very good photo camera. But let's say you don't even want those photo features. There's still a compelling argument for the A6700 for a lot of people, your everyday people who don't need certain pro features. Number one, it is $400 cheaper, and you get a smaller and lighter body. It's easier to take around. It is better for gimbal work. It is better for things like vlogging. It has better clear image zoom. It has better streaming capabilities. So for your regular content creator, the A6700 may be more than what you need. Now, if you do need those features of an FX30, you know who you are. The people who definitely need the 2 card slots. They need the camera to be extremely reliable under warm conditions. They want maybe the HDMI raw output. They want the full-size HDMI. They want a more rugged body. They want the mounting points and the XLR handle. If you're somebody, you're doing hardcore video all the time. That sounds wrong, but you're doing video all of the time. I don't care what genre of video that you're doing, but let's say you do a lot of video, the FX30, it is easier to use and it is more reliable. So if you're someone who has designs on short films, pro work, things like that, the FX30, definitely a great value. So by the time you're watching this, I probably have already pre-ordered my A6700 because I want that one along with my FX30. I use them for different things. So let me know down below which camera you prefer and why. We'll have a nice little discussion about it. Thanks for watching this. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.